Welcome, everyone, to the Learning and Development Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Nolan Hout. This is sponsored by Infopro Learning. Joining me today, we have an incredibly special guest, Sriraj Mallick, who is the CEO of Infopro Learning. For over 30 years, Sriraj has been the catalyst for change in the organizations he's been with. Early on, whether he was advising Microsoft on how he was using products in innovative ways that they didn't even know about, or most recently, where he's making some pretty big waves in learning and development, which we're going to unpack here in just a minute. Today, we're going to talk about a lot of different things, but mostly on this idea of AI. But instead of speaking about the application of AI, like how we're using it, we're actually going to be getting into real world results of AI and how these investments in AI have been paying off for organizations, not just Infopro, but for many of our clients. I'm excited for this podcast to start, and I'm sure you are as well. Sriraj Mallick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Nolan. Thanks for having me.
Before we begin, we always like to start with a little bit of an origin story, if you would, Sriraj. So if you don't mind, I mean, you're the CEO of Infopro Learning. You obviously didn't start your career there.
Uh-huh.
Where did you start and how did you get to becoming the CEO?
I started my career out of college. I was an entrepreneur and did a startup, mostly a technology startup. I was a technologist and developing softwares for large organizations in the area I was operating in. And that back then it was in India. And soon I grew out from that area and joined a large organization, which was again in a role of setting up their e-governance practice in India, and slowly moved up the corporate ladder and had different opportunities to lead different functions. So that gave me the spread of understanding businesses, not just from an engineering standpoint, but also through different functions like sales and marketing, finance, and so on and so forth. I was spearheading an acquisition we did at some point, which gave me really good lessons in terms of how to establish how to establish and build new businesses, and that came into being because I had this experience in my past. So I have been a builder since day one, and every role I got, every opportunity I had, I used my builder mindset to build out that business. And then some 8 years back, I happened to be in this conversation where the parent organization, the major investors in Infopro Learning, were looking for a new CEO, and I felt like the there was a time for the HR and talent development space to get disrupted, and I really wanted to have this experience and put some of my expertise into being, because one of the things that drew me into this space was my conviction and my purpose of unlocking human potential. And so I built my business, I built my team members and myself applying the same purpose. And this company gave me that, and sort of fired up my passion. And so that's how I became the CEO of Infopro Learning.
So, did you find yourself before Infopro Learning? You mentioned your, engineering background, tech background. Um, how did you feel going from possibly one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum from like people, like solution you're solving, or maybe the intersection is a lot tighter and there wasn't much difference. But what was like that leap for you to focus more on the learning, development, training end versus the heavy tech side?
It was a big change for me in terms of being in the digital or the tech space and then moving to HR and talent development space.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big change. But the role, it was also a step up in my role, and that was a challenging, requirement. So I felt like it was time for me to challenge myself,
Yeah.
and so to utilize all the capabilities I'd built. This role would help unlock further potential that I would have as a business leader. So I took this role, but most importantly, my calling was in the fact that this company was built on the foundation of its purpose of unlocking human potential. So
Mm.
everything we did then and we do now with our clients or with our employees is basis that foundational philosophy of how are we helping unlock the potential of people we are working for. and the services and the product lines that we are having in Infopro clearly addresses that purpose.
Yeah. And when you look at unlocking that potential, is there like a core behind that, right? A lot of people feel there's lots of different ways to do that. They go about it through different ways. Is there like a core belief that maybe you have or that Infopro Learning has that is to unlock the potential of the people? Here's like that trend line. Here's what we focus on as an organization to ensure that we are doing that.
Yes, I mean, if you just look at from a systems perspective in an organization, the HR team, specifically the talent development or the learning development team, has a mandate, a specific mandate to develop their people, right?
Yeah.
And so all the services that this organization provides, right, from leadership development to coaching to skills development, Infopro Learning provides these services at global scale. And so that's the connection within our purpose and the services we offer.
Right. Yeah. So one of the and one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on was this major press release that just came out, that you penned, and this so August 6th for those that when this comes out, where you are promising a 30% reduction in learning and development cost while simultaneously expanding learner reach. I mean, that's a pretty lofty mission or promise, I guess, if you would, a performance, guarantee. Tell me a little bit about how that came about. Like, and we'll unpack about, how we're
Sure.
living it, this, that, and the other, but how did you kind of get to this of, I've got to put this into the world? 'Cause that's a big thing to put out.
That's right. Actually, 2 years back when, we started playing with AI and machine learning and things like that, we figured that it will have a deep disruptive impact in our industry, specifically to our business. So it came across as some part threat and some part opportunity.
Right.
And so what we did, Nolan, was we said, if we go in this direction, we have to almost think about cannibalizing our own services, right?
Yeah.
And we better do that ourselves and start learning how to really use AI in our workflows and reach the same level of quality and, in fact, higher capability, and pass on any savings that we get as a result of that.
So for those that don't know Infopro is a professional services consulting organization. So they work with large organizations to develop custom learning and training solutions. Think, kind of bigger, larger transformation projects. So I think when Sriraj is saying, cannibalize our business, he's saying, well, AI is set to take a lot of the work on that we used to do. So I just want to add a little bit of context.
Thank you. Yeah. And so that's when we started forming these task force. So yes, we did that. We had a understanding of the trajectory of impact we will see 2-3 years down the line. And now I reflect back, I think we were still not as ambitious in our vision as much as we should have been, even though we have made so much ground. And simply because just the strides AI has taken in the last 6 months, or every month, you see the capability of the models and what they're able to do is increasing dramatically. So going back, we set up some task force that were tasked to look at our workflows, the major workflows in our organization when we produce a service like a training content, and think about how do we use AI in this workflow so that we can, really amp up the quality, make immersive learning experience, design better product, but also do it at a much lower cost. So that was the remit given to the task force, right? And then, so we had a delivery model, and then the result of what this task force did and the innovations they did through our delivery process, we then called that whole new framework, we call it the intelligent design framework. And now we are
Mm.
going through the second iteration. We are at IDF 2.1 now. We recently launched 2.1, which is a set of processes, connected with these AI tools that we developed over a period of time that helps us right from the time where we are doing demand planning for learning to the intake process where we act as a performance consultant and we design new learning programs, right? Learning
Mm.
journeys, and all the way to structure a storyboard. So essentially, we did high quality work on the design side. Then came production, where we had to do a lot of media uplift. And so, as you already know, there are hundreds of tools out there that create synthetic media, right? And so we were able to use some tools, work very closely with those product teams, right, to share our understanding of what we needed from a learning standpoint. These were very early days, and we helped them build new features in those tools, which we are now using for our clients, which is really reducing our effort to deliver very high quality learning programs.
Right. And I think one of those tools that you're a partner with is Colossian. Is that right? Is that like an example of one of those tools that you've been able to leverage
That's
to kind of
right.
reduce that time cost
Yeah.
associated with an asset that used to
Yeah.
take a lot longer to make?
Yeah, and they have done a fantastic job. For example, they came up with this avatar concept that we in the learning world use a lot. They also released their video-based branching scenarios, and so we
Yeah.
do a lot of branching scenarios, and so it really helped us in lifting an average learning experience to something which was more immersive and interactive, at a much lower cost.
So so that those are like front end, right? Where as you mentioned, you're taking script writing just as a really simple thing, but the whole storyboard process, it sounds like you're building a lot of AI automation. Then you have the production of the asset that we already talked about. Um, what about like the non fun thing, like the not pretty pictures, things like that? Have you been able to leverage much AI, or maybe it's more automation on like the process side of things? I'm assuming, InfoPro has 500 or so instructional designers, lots of instructional designers. How are you leveraging AI to keep the gears spinning behind the scenes and churning efficiency there?
So, so when we came together, the good thing about AI is that the adoption has been really high.
Right.
Usually, with technology, it takes a while for adoption. Um, we didn't limit ourselves just to a design or synthetic media. We looked at every step of our value stream for every service, and we looked at where can a deterministic system play a role and where can a generative system play a role. So, and wherever we use AI for, let's say, generation of ideas or synthesizing our frameworks with a client content, we made sure that we have strong guardrails so that we are not using content that we should not be using. We hold privacy of client content in a very strong way. So we had to secure everything that we are doing. And even when doing so, we still have a lot of our current workflows which operate in traditional models because some of our clients are in high compliance industries and they have not given us permission to use AI at all. So it's like a bit of that transition, but we have been using AI use cases across the board in every element of a learning and talent development lifecycle. Another
So
example that comes to my mind, Nolan, is um, many companies are looking for true personalized and adaptive learning experiences to find a learner where they are and start from there. So we are helping them in building and using AIs in the tools that they may be using and still be able to craft journeys which are highly adaptive and personalized.
So from what I understand, at least, capturing is with InfoPro, by the nature of the work being done, is so uh, so many different. We probably have more instructional designers, a bigger learning team than the clients that we work with, by the nature of that being our core focus. How To the extent that you're comfortable, what have been the results of this, right? I think you had said earlier your strategy was, well, we really need to understand it before we go and kind of help our clients better understand it. What are those kinds of benefits that you saw Infopro Learning has seen by adopting these things like, the IDF 2.1, that you mentioned, the partnerships with Colossian? What are you seeing as a result of this?
I think one of the challenges that most organizations face when they're large teams like we have is uh, we we struggle to find consistent approach to a quality deliverable. Every person
Hmm.
is at a
Yep.
different stage in their life cycle, in their skill set, right? And so, and it happens over time. What we did with AI was, regardless of where the person is, we were able to lift everyone up through
Mm.
certain standard outputs that we were able to create. So, as an example, when we are doing a learning journey design, we created a model that allows it to act like a performance consultant. And as an instructional designer is crafting a learning journey, it sort of becomes like a thinking partner and nudging. Did you think about this? Or, if this is the use case, how about these three things? So it
Mm.
becomes like an ideation partner. End of the day, our employees, the instructional designer or the learning experience architect, have to take the final call. We'll never allow an AI produced work to go out anywhere. So what we did differently is we made AI almost like a co-partner who is an assistant that is helping us reach higher levels of quality. Actually, I could also use the word unlocking the human's capability faster
Yeah.
and better.
Yeah.
You know?
I heard somebody say recently that they encourage their team to think of themselves as the CEO and every AI tool they use as their employee. And so I have an employee that does my script writing. I have an employee that does my media production. I have my employee that does this. Because when you start thinking that as assistants, co-pilots, co-agents, whatever it is, it really, you start to realize there's a little bit of ownership there of, okay,
Right.
I'm giving my colleague this task, but before I submit it, I have to do it. So, as a result of this, so you did it at InfoPro Learning. Um, I'm assuming the natural extension from that is working with these other leaders of learning companies. Has InfoPro Learning been partnering with other agencies? Because you mentioned, cannibalizing. It's kind of an interesting thing. Are you scared to go to the market and teach other L&D leaders like the secrets, or are you realizing, if I don't teach them, somebody else will? So tell me a little bit about how how that maturity has been, and so maybe even some like lessons you've learned or some things that some other leaders have shared with you.
Sure. One of the best ways of unlocking potential of others is to give and share freely. And that
Hmm.
creates a loop where you get to learn more, faster, better. That has been the philosophy. So we share everything that we learn and create with our clients and other learning leaders. And we learn from them on a day-to-day basis. We learn their challenges and what would not work with them and what would work for them, as an example. The area where this really started coming together is learning leaders, specifically in large global organizations. They are also facing this challenge. Um, Three major challenges. The skill life has gone down from what used to be 5 years to 2.5 years, and even lesser now. And so there is this continuous churn of skills development, and skills in organizations are their competitive advantage, right?
Hmm.
So they're facing, the leaders are facing that as a challenge, and then they're facing a challenge of managing a large learning team which is doing learning administration and managing hundreds of other things that are non-core to their business, right? Which is taking away their energy and effort and a lot of resources. Now, now add to all of this the disruption that AI is causing, right? So when you think about this, this is a time of a perfect disruption that a training or a learning leader would face. And then because of all the economic uncertainties that organizations are going, there's a huge case of optimizing for efficiency, for cost reductions in these organizations. Where all of this started coming together is because we started to solve this problem for our own company, our own business, because we built these tools fairly early on and gave it time to mature. What happened is that with that maturity and our capability in designing new operating models, the ability to govern an end-to-end global infrastructure to run learning programs, we were able to fit in all these new tools and technologies in the entire life cycle of what we now call as a managed learning service, right? Right from your demand planning to designing programs to managing hundreds of trainers and in fact thousands of trainers and vendors across library of content and different kinds of training programs, whether it is online or in person, etc. So now because we did all of this and it matured, all of this came together. And what we found was in every program that we were implementing for these organizations, we found that we were able to save at least 35 to 40%, if not more. In fact, we have examples of much more than that, but at least that, right?
Yeah.
And that
So
was
the
phenomenal.
30% is like the, if we're able to save 40%, I'm willing to stick my neck out there and say 30% because I am confident that if the company does invest at this type of scale, 30% actually is the benchmark that I'd want them to even hold me accountable for.
That's right. Yeah.
Hmm.
In fact, I was a week back, I was in this business review meeting with a major energy organization, and we are running their entire managed learning services program. 6 months in, and we found that we have already saved over $3 million within the
Whoa.
6 months, and we have a trajectory of saving at least $7.5 million through the end of the first year. And one of the comments I got from a customer was that they were expecting any other partner would have taken 18 to 24 months to reach this level of value unlock, which Infopro, the team um, on this project, have been able to achieve. So it was a very proud moment for all of us.
So how are you advising? And one of the things that I talk quite a bit about when I'm consulting organizations on AI is this idea of you save this money, or I should say, you save the production costs, but you want to reinvest that. Or I guess the question, I usually say, don't look at it as just saying, hey, I no longer need this money to run my business. I more say, use that money to expand your reach so you're able to do more with less or do more with the same. How, and this client or another clients, how are you saying, take this cost savings that I give you and reinvest that into a way to expand your reach or to do something else? Or most companies being forced to just cut that cost and kind of, but do the same with the reduced cost?
I think the later is what most companies are going through right now. There's a
Okay.
mandate from the CFO, the organization, to reduce cost. But what we have seen is they still want to make sure that the talent that they have internally is well utilized in other parts of the business where they are scaling, right? So we have been able to see a lot of that. We have also ensured continuity and just the knowledge that organizations have by rebadging many employees, right? So we have a model which allows us to rebadge some of them and then train them on our tools and then provide the same level of Infopro services that they would be doing. So that has also worked for us in a nice way.
So if a company if somebody is listening to this and they're thinking, well, gosh, that sounds great. Like what is the path to that, to like saving this 30%? How does somebody get from this idea, this concept to reality? They're like, okay, Infopro, let me take you up on this guarantee. How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. And before I answer that, Nolan, I just want to add a couple of other use cases so everyone, all the listeners understand it's not just one use case in terms of training design or development. But in a training organization, there are hundreds of trainers, and you will see almost there's a lot of inefficiency in training the delivery component of it. Sometimes the classes are not optimized. The number of participants in the classes are not, you know, they are much lesser
Right.
than
There's only two per class
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. The trainer's schedule is not optimized. So when you look at it, we built something called the training efficiency forensics. It has 15 parameters to intake the data points of your training, whatever training you're doing in an organization. And we use an AI tool to run analytics to identify
Mm.
gaps in 15 areas. We call it the
Whoa.
forensics approach to create optimize efficiencies or optimization, and that becomes one of the strategic drivers to reduce cost. And examples like this are used in every aspect of running a training function. So in effect, really making them efficient, but then using that, not just leaving it there, but because we come from the talent development learning background, sort of lifting the learning experience, making it personalized and adaptive, right? And making sure that we focus not just on completion rates, which should shoot
Yeah.
up dramatically, but also outcomes of what this training program will help business achieve. So we have laser focused on those areas and provide the whole analytics infrastructure to our customers to see ROI in those areas as well. Now, coming back to the question you asked about what are the steps they should be
Yeah.
taking to do this? Usually, these programs are large programs. They require long-term commitments. And usually the first step is to what we call a business case workshop.
Hmm.
So what we do, Nolan, is we have a team that goes into this discovery process. It's a 1 week. It takes 1 week, but usually 2 or 3 interviews for a couple of hours, where we capture at a very high level where is this organization in our maturity curve, in our maturity model from a learning, design, and development standpoint. And basis that, we are able to create a business case document with a hypothesis around what we understood, what the future state could be from these interviews, and then we create a roadmap and give them a financial commitment that, given your current spend and the infrastructure that you're running, the deliverables that you have committed to your business, and the promises you have made, if we were to do it, here is the impact we are going to make, and this would be the new cost. So that gives them an idea as to, okay, how do we now start the process? So we have a very sort of easy framework for adoption, where we start with a pilot. Usually customers go through a contracting process, and then we start
Mm.
the transition plan, which itself, in these organizations, the transition is one of the most important exercise. So we build some blueprints that allows us to do a risk-free transition. And so from there on, we do some shadowing, and then we go into there's a path to reach steady state in this process.
So you mentioned risk, and I think that's a big, takeaway that I hear a lot from
Mhm.
people. And now I know, it's changing. It's interesting. I remember talking 2 years ago to a gentleman who's been on the podcast a couple times, and he's like, "Listen, I've just been told I can't touch AI, right? And nobody in the organization can. It was a big financial institution. He just said, listen, it's a complete no go.
Mhm.
But then I talked with him 6 months ago, and he's like, yeah, they're now starting to drive actually that. But I think that's one big area. That I think some people synonymize AI with risk, and kind of view that as a well, if that's where this is coming from, if all of my cost saving is just coming from AI, then maybe we're not the right fit. what I'd love to hear from you is one, like how risky do you think AI is, like for your clients, and just in general, right? Like how big of a risk, and where are those risks live? I think that'd be like my first question, and then I've got a follow up on that as well.
Yeah, I think data security, privacy are very important elements. One of the things when I use AI, one of the things that we are very cautious of is not using clients' data in a large language model that exposes them to privacy issues. Very strict. We have gone through multiple audits. Our clients have approved wherever we are using it. But it's not just use of AI that creates these efficiencies. AI is
Mm,
one big enabler. So, for instance, the other use case I was telling you about training efficiency. Well, we are
yeah.
using AI more like an Excel sheet to crunch numbers, do some analytics, right? So that does not, um, you know, uh, eh, create privacy. Like there's no content that is going out to the LLM. But what I feel customers really fear is that they have organizational data that will leak.
Mm,
And we have to be very clear that that's a no-go area for us. We work with the top 5 pharmaceutical organizations, banks, manufacturing organizations, and they have high compliance and data privacy standards and risk tolerance to it. So we see that as a big risk, and we make sure that we are validating every step of the way, taking approvals, and when there's absolutely there are no-go areas, so we'll absolutely not use AI in those areas.
Yeah, one of the nice things, at least that I was doing a webinar yesterday, and I was demonstrating Notebook LM, and some of the power that it can do, which is a great tool. And somebody had mentioned in the chat, is this a secure tool? And somebody immediately was like, no, no, absolutely not. And I was like, well, it is. And so like I was thinking, I was reflecting a little bit more back on, okay, this person was like, no, you can't. It's highly unsecure. But then Google's been fairly big on, like, even if you use the free model of Notebook, we're not using any of that. We are only going to store the data that you put it so that you can reuse it. We're not training our models on it. We're not doing so. I do think there's also like some misconception of it, but I think there's also like the idea of and working with a client on the difference between, okay, well, this is protecting your data, but if it's not a part of your ecosystem, then it's as unprotected as you storing, I don't know, credit card details on your laptop, right? So there's inherent risk to it, in the sense that there's the same inherent risk to somebody cracking your Gmail password if you sent yourself an email of your customer
Yes.
list or whatever it is. So there's obviously inherent risk. But one of the things you said, which I think is kind of apt, is, and I think I did this like it was like a fireside chat with a couple other people, and it was on this idea of like, how do we work with vendors to like improve efficiencies? And it wasn't really on AI, it was really more on the things that you're talking about. And I remember very vividly a conversation with this lady who was the CLO of a company, smaller company. She had a PhD in adult education principles, and she's like, I spend 5 hours a week managing my LMS, like as the LMS admin. She's like, I must be the world's most expensive LMS admin. And so, and I see that. I think yesterday I was like, on PayPal, she's like just doing the same thing. She's like, I spend so much time just like doing these things, and I feel so bad doing it because, and I think, for me, when I look at my adoption of AI
Uh-huh.
personally, I've actually realized that's where that big gap lives, is like my ability to think strategically and use the tool and drive the business has been magnified with AI. And it's actually also helped me understand there are things that I just shouldn't be doing anymore, because I can be a magnifier at the top, and everything I do at the top has much bigger results down at the bottom. And so, yeah, I think orgs are becoming a little bit more mature in their view of where their spend is, what they want their talent to be. Do they want to continue to build um, roles in their organization that don't have a really high growth pattern. And it's like a colleague of one, right? A gentleman I met at a tech company, he said, like, I'm outsourcing this role to you because I don't have a growth path for this person. And I was like, that's a phenomenal way to look at it,
Yeah,
is I don't have, this is such a small department. I'm not going to be able to take that person and bring them into here. And so if it's not strategic and if I can't provide an incentive for this person, then it doesn't
that's
work
right.
for me. So I'm sure that there are tons of efficiencies gained outside of this AI realm, as
Absolutely.
well. Where
Absolutely.
do you think so? You're InfoPro is kind of at the edge of AI. You've mentioned you've invested and kind of transitioned the company for the past 2.5 years, so you have a bit of a leg up on some of the others. What would you say the biggest advancements have been so far for you? Maybe you personally, then maybe like as an org, that's really surprised you and been like, "Whoa, I didn't think that." And then, what do you think is coming in the near future that you're excited about?
Oh, there's a lot to unpack. um, as we started developing our capability, we understood this dramatic change in the future of work as humans and AI start working together. Today, we are thinking about it in the context of it's a human being and a agent. Soon enough, you will see multiple agents working with a human being. Result of that work is dependent on the quality of context you provide.
Hmm.
So we in Infopro have realized it's not just your AI infrastructure, the LLM or the chat or the agents or prompts. It is about the infrastructure that we will need to build to provide context to AI agents so that they don't hallucinate, they provide precise results for different functions and roles that employees are conducting in organizations. If that were not to happen, then adoption of AI will be limited to doing sort of lifting some work at a level where human beings will, it's still a very good place, but people who are looking at preciseness, correctness, high quality that aligns to their organization's goals consistently, they will lack trust for those kind of
Hmm.
workloads. So for the workloads to really be successful, organizations have to start thinking about context engineering and framing their vision on how they will provide right context to agents.
Hmm.
And we are really doing cutting edge work in this area right now in Infopro because we are the enablers of how human beings and agents will work together. Another area we feel which will be very disruptive is learning as we know today, while through an online class or through in-person training, facilitated training, all those to require content to be created, case studies to be created, experiences to be created beforehand, right? And then consumption happens either through a learning management platform or by going into a classroom or a Zoom call and consuming that content. One of the problems this um, in this design that traditionally we have been solving for is that once you make it, it's not personalized for each individual,
Hmm.
right? But now, if you really look at it, what AI is able to do is you can create training on the fly when your employee needs it, customized or personalized to where the employee is in their proficiency level for that skill.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's a
Hyper
big
personalization.
advancement we are seeing. We are working on creating some of these learning programs on the fly. We are also seeing that it's not just the chat interface that it's not limited to just the chat interface. What we see in the next few years is the user experience for consuming learning will not be limited just to chat. in fact, the new user experiences will also be generative in nature. So now employees and learners can engage with more interactive, engaging, scenario-based learning using on-the-fly created user experiences, like we built it on a Rise or Articulate
Yeah.
Storyline or Synthesia, et cetera, these tools. So we see that coming in the future. I see a lot of work we are doing on coaching, on-the-job coaching and performance support. We see a lot of preciseness in that area, especially like use cases like onboarding or leadership use cases like conflict resolution or giving performance feedback to someone. If you're going into a meeting, you need an instant coaching to be done. There you go. And so
Yeah.
for all these to happen, Nolan, we have realized that context is the oxygen that will allow this infrastructure to really thrive. And that's an area that we are all trying to work on.
Yeah. I'd like your take on this. I was reflecting on a product that we helped launch,
Mhm.
which was the leadership coach. And I was talking to somebody about kind of the error rate of that, right? And I said, listen, um, take anybody who's been trained on anything, right? Blanchard trained consultant, right? They
Mhm.
pay whatever money they got to do. They can now do that. Sandler sales training, right? You hire somebody from Sandler, they become your sales coach. How many mistakes do you think that person makes in their life?
Mhm.
How many times do you think they quote the wrong thing or give the wrong thing?
Mhm.
How many times are they out of the office? How many of the times do they have their own agenda or they show up wrong? And what does that lead to?
Mhm.
And I was like, with ours, you mentioned context. We've put the equivalent of that, but our own content into this coach. Now, yeah, I am sure that there are times where the coach might get something wrong,
Mhm.
but I would guess that it gets it right more often than the human would get it right
Right.
by the nature of its ability to not bring in other conversations to it, to not do all these other things, and to be hyper personalized for me, because I'm now engaging with that. What do you think about? Like, do you think that's right? Do you think that's wrong?
Yeah, in some cases, error rates are um, like a no-go if there is an error
Yeah,
in some functions and some industries, you can't live with that. So, I mean, even if a user or an employee is generating an error, it is easy to, you have systems and processes to deal with it.
correct.
What we have not built is what is the new design and the process to deal with an agentic error.
Right.
And so you are seeing this whole movement where the time you were investing in design, I think that comes down, but your time you're investing in validation goes up.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's the whole area of trying to create new processes
And
around
I
it.
think that's where I was talking. I think a lot of us are in this mode where we kind of see, it's like me. I have a very old truck.
Mhm.
It's got 200,000 miles on it. I want to buy a new one, but like the cost of buying a new one just is so much for what I can trade my truck in for. And so the gap is so wide, it actually prevents me from doing anything. It's going
That's
to take
right.
something catastrophic, right? Like my truck to break down. Um, and like before I get off my butt and spend whatever I have to do for a truck. And I think a lot of us in the learning space are like, we know that's where, like, we have a vision of where it's headed in 2 or 3 years. It's not quite there. I'm not quite ready to be there yet. So what do I do in the interim, right? Do I keep creating rice course? And what I tell people is like, listen, you're going to still create rice courses for the next 2 years. Like you're going to, that's what's going to happen. Your storyline, that's going to be the case for the majority of us. That still has to happen. Now you have two choices. You can either spend $100 on it or you can spend $20 on it.
Mhm.
Would you rather spend $20 over the next year, save yourself some money to then invest in the new truck? So like I tell people, don't get so caught up on whatever move I have to make now has to be my move in the future. There's nothing wrong with making a short decision and saving some bucks,
Yeah.
up front. to help fund that investment down the path. And I wanted to answer my own question of where for me, I think the big leap that I saw in AI, and I think
Hmm.
is a big leap, is being able to leverage AI as a thinking partner
Hmm.
is really I think a watershed moment for a lot of people when they're at their various stages of adoption. It's
Hmm.
when you go, um, and I've seen it actually in the eyes of my team when I opened up Claude and I said, I don't know how to do this. Give me a recommendation. In their mind, they were thinking, well, I just thought we did that to create a picture or to create an image or create a
Right.
whatever. So for me, and I think like as we all start to use, so for me, once the model was sharp enough to actually help me think and get me to my destination of where I wanted to go,
Right.
that was kind of a
Aha moment.
watershed moment, aha moment for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but before we end the podcast today, and thank you, Sriraj, for investing your time with us. Is there anything you want to kind of leave with the audience? We started by talking about this commitment, to the industry of if you work with Infopro Learning, we're gonna save you 30% of your cost. We've covered the journeys of not just AI, but like in general, like L&D operations. Any like last words of advice to our listeners, to these other L&D leaders who are on the show?
Yeah, I think like all of us, the talent development space who are, day in and out thinking about skills development and talent development, they are facing tremendous challenges, disruptions, and opportunities. I think um, just being out there and experimenting and trying and trying and trying would lead us to some amazing solutions, and then sharing it with others, what has worked with you and what we can learn from you is an amazing opportunity for us, all of us, to level up. I think I I I feel like if you look at the last few decades, it you can characterize them as huge technology advancements for enterprise. From data and analytics to cloud and all those good things happen. I think we are at a stage where the biggest step change for enterprises and their competitive advantage would be how do we solve for the equation of human plus AI? And if
Mm.
we can solve that and we can work towards that goal and help unlock true potential of our employees and our learners, that would be a great future to participate in.
Well, well said. And I'd be remiss if I didn't end, now that we've covered all of this serious stuff, on a personal note. Those that don't know, Shraj, you have unlocked my potential. This podcast was very much your idea for saying, Nolan, this is something that you're good at. I think you should see what you can do. I think you should start this channel and see who you can get on and have these conversations. And so I want to thank you for unlocking my potential. Without this, we would have never had this podcast that has these thousands of listeners and followers, everything like that. I feel like this is a real full circle moment for me, of you kind of pushing me to unlock this potential of my own. So I want to end by saying thank you for that. You've been a great mentor for me along the way.
Thank you, Roland. That's so nice of you. Thank you.
All right, we'll talk soon. Thank you.